guest speaker, Rick Ector. What Rick does is teach proficiency and safety and the proper usage of firearms. He's also very knowledgeable on rights aspect of this philosophically and constitutionally, and you've seen him on TV frequently. He's very articulate, and we're really pleased that he's here. So ladies and gentlemen, please, a big round of applause for Rick Ector.
As I look at that situation and the arguments that people use to justify taking away my gun, I started delving into the actual history of gun control. Like, where did these people come from? Were they always here? Where did they come up with these ridiculous arguments? Why do we even need to have a law to possess and carry a concealed pistol if the United States Constitution, the Second Amendment, tells us that we have the right to keep and bear arms? Even Article 1, Section 6 of the State of Michigan Constitution says that you have the right to keep and bear arms to protect yourself and for the defense of the state. Why in the world is it even illegal to carry a concealed pistol that the constitutions of the federal government and the state of Michigan says that you have a right to carry? Why do we have these laws? Where did they come from? To understand where these laws came from, I'd have to take you back into history. And when I describe this court case in particular, from my perspective, it comes from a case that occurred in 1925. It was the Ossian Sweet case. Dr. Ossian Sweet was a black physician who had a practice in the city of Detroit. He wanted to move his family to a very nice community. I mean, you figure you go to college, you go to medical school, you receive requisite training and license as a physician, you're making a little money. The natural thing for everyone in that position is to do good for your family, to provide for them on a level that maybe you didn't have when you were growing up as a kid. So he wanted to move them over to Virgil Street. Virgil, in the corner of Virgil and Charlevoix. That house still exists today. They call it the old Sweet Home. Well, as Dr. Sweet was making preparations to move his family into this home, this particular organization, which had a name which I will say was a misnomer, they called themselves the Neighborhood Improvement Association. This Neighborhood Improvement Association basically carried out its improvements by keeping certain undesirables out of the neighborhood. And yes, Dr. Sweet, even though he was a doctor, licensed and practiced in the state of Michigan, he still was not accepted. He was still not appreciated and not welcome. They told Dr. Sweet, they said, look, if you come into this home, you occupy this residence, we are going to make you very sorry that you did. So, Dr. Sweet, he got the message. And you know what? Undaunted, undeterred, he was going to occupy that home and assume his right place in the city for his family. But you know what? He brought his guns with him. And he brought family members. And yes, those family members had guns too. So yes, every family member of adult age had long guns and handguns, rounds of ammunition, just in case this Neighborhood Improvement Association was going to make good on their threats. Now, make no mistake about it. There was a verified and confirmed number, 500 people present outside of this home, saying all sorts of unpleasant things about his occupation of this residence. There was even police officers stationed on the street. No laws were broken, right? Every one of these protesters had their right to freedom of speech, to have free expression, right? They also had their right to freedom of assembly, right? So no crime was being committed. So obviously the police said, hey, there's no reason for us to do anything. This situation seems to be under control. Well, soon thereafter, hours into the evening, someone fired their guns into the home. And the occupants of the Sweet Home returned fire. And yes, 2 people in the mob of the Neighborhood Improvement Association were shot, and they indeed perished. They died. Then, and only then, the police decided that, hey, we believe that we have probable cause that a crime might have been committed. And yes, we're going to go into the house and we're going to arrest everyone present. And so as they arrested everyone who was present, Dr. Sweet and his brother were put on trial in 1925 for the murder of 2 individuals who were in that mob, who were upset that Dr. Sweet had moved into the neighborhood. And you got to remember, this is 1925 Detroit. Now, you know what? Even though I'm getting up there in age, I wasn't around in 1925. And if there's somebody that tells you that I was around in 1925, make sure you let me know who it was that said that I was that old. Okay? 1925 was a different place with respect to the actual diversity or lack of in the city of Detroit. It was a place that had a very heavy Klan influence. They infiltrated basically every level of government, whether it's the judiciary, local leadership, and local law enforcement. But an astonishing thing happened in this trial. Some names that became well known as a result of this case. We had the defense attorney, was none other than the renowned attorney, Clarence Darrow, who went on to do a number of other legally important court cases, such as the Scopes trial, for example. The presiding judge of this case was none other than Frank Murphy. And a lot of us, when we hear that name, Frank Murphy, we associate it with that building that's downtown, you know, the courthouse where the major and serious crimes occur. And yes, Frank Murphy, Judge Frank Murphy, went on to become a mayor of the city of Detroit. And yes, he even went on to become a justice on the United States Supreme Court. So we can see some of the ramifications that came out of this astonishing trial. As a result of this trial, an all-white jury had the audacity to acquit Dr. Sweet and his brother of all charges for defending their home against this mob. And in 1925, that was pure heresy. Nothing like that should ever be allowed to happen, not only in the city of Detroit, but the entire state. It then should not surprise us that just a mere 2 years later, legislation was brought forth and enacted that would severely change the laws with respect to firearms in the great Wolverine state. For example, the Michigan Firearms Act of 1927 created county gun boards in each one of Michigan's constituent 83 counties. We now had the regulation of concealed pistol licenses. We had those concealed pistol licenses that were done on a discretionary basis. And when I say discretionary basis, that's different from what we have today, which is called shall issue. Under shall issue, a person, once they've met all of the requirements, and I'll tell you, there's at least 4 pages of requirements that exist there, right? 21 years of age, state of Michigan resident alien, there's a laundry list of any misdemeanor crimes you could not have committed in 3 years, 8 years. I mean, there's things such as do not operate a locomotive while intoxicated. Do not fly an airplane while intoxicated. You think of a charge, it's on there in those 4 pages of notes that preclude you from getting a concealed pistol license. And other things such as no felony convictions. And the list goes on and on and on. So back then we had this discretionary business. And by discretionary, each of these 83 county gun boards could determine, based on their own criteria, who they felt was worthy enough to get a concealed pistol license. There was a very predictable results in 1927 Detroit era politics. In that era, counties in which people of color primarily resided, such as Wayne County, hardly anyone ever got a CPL or a concealed pistol license. If you were well connected, if you had some business that generated tens of thousands of dollars, if you had the blessings of local politicians and the political elite, then yes. Otherwise, you couldn't. And then when you compare that with the surrounding counties, it was not a big deal. You wanted one, local government didn't care. They say, okay, you want one? Here, take it, great. Now you're licensed. So this case, the Ossia Sweet case, and the resulting legislation in 1927, it really drove home the fact that gun control, particularly here in the state of Michigan, is designed to disarm certain classes of people from owning firearms. And make no mistake about it, all forms of gun control is really race control, the controlling of people and their means of freedom, their means of empowerment, their means of protecting themselves, their homes, and their families. One of the things that typically happens when we sit idly by and let people suffer an injustice of some sort or another is that, generally speaking, given enough time, enough acceptance, this process will be rolled out and disseminated and implemented everywhere else, which is why we should never, ever definitely infringe upon the inherent, God-given, constitutionally recognized rights that we all have as Americans. Definitely should not do that. Earlier, when I mentioned my affinity for coming to events such as this and to see friends and to network with them, it is during this walk that I really truly understand that I've developed what I call my personal litmus test for the character of various persons and individuals. It's only one question, and it really boils down to, what is your opinion on the Second Amendment? Do you believe that I have a right to keep it on a fire? Because let me tell you, if they do agree with you, that means that they have the capability to honor you, to respect you, and to trust you. Anyone who would give you a gun or would not stand in your way of getting a gun is definitely someone that I would call a friend. And I will tell you today that of the people that I call friends, definitely would not advocate for gun control and definitely would not advocate to have my guns taken away. Those people are truly my friend, and our relationship is reciprocal. I would never do that. When you look at the other scenario, any person who does not respect you or trust you with a gun, does not respect your empowerment, does not respect your freedom, and you should not hang out with them, you should not network with them. You know what? You shouldn't even work for them, and I would even go even further. You should not support them, and you should not vote for them, ever. Anyone who does not respect your right to keep and bear. Remember, if you get nothing else out of what I said today, remember this. In every relationship that you contemplate joining, use my litmus test. Find out if that person respects your right to own a gun. If they do that, you know by default a lot of other things about this person. That will tell you ultimately, do they respect you and do they trust you? And someone who respects you and trusts you is deserving of your friendship. And I want to say this. I want to be your friend. Thank you.